My name is Anna Sørensen. I am 29 years old, an architect specializing in sustainable design, living in Copenhagen, Denmark. For as long as I can remember, I have felt like a shadow in my own family. The spotlight always fell on my older brother, Lukas, the golden son my father, Magnus Sørensen, carefully prepared to inherit Sørensen Byggefirma, the respected construction company he built from nothing. My achievements were acknowledged politely but never celebrated, as if they were minor footnotes to Lukas's destined greatness. When my father died suddenly of a heart attack, I returned to my hometown of Aalborg for the reading of his will. I carried no illusions. I expected the same dismissive smirks from Lukas, who never missed an opportunity to remind me of my place. He often joked that I would inherit nothing more than our late mother's collection of antique architectural models, while he would claim both the house and the company. To him, the script of our lives had already been written. But everything shifted in that quiet, wood-paneled office when the lawyer began to speak. Let me tell you the story of how my brother's arrogance unraveled, and how I discovered myself in the legacy my parents left behind. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Growing up in the shadow of Sørensen Byggefirma. I grew up in Aalborg, a port city that carried both the quiet rhythms of the sea and the restless ambition of industry. There, the name Sørensen meant something. It was stamped on construction sites, etched into steel beams, whispered with respect in boardrooms, and printed on the side of trucks that rumbled down Jutland's highways. Sørensen Byggefirma was not just a company, it was a legacy, and in my father's eyes, it was meant for only one person, my brother Lukas. From the beginning, my life was defined by that shadow. My father, Magnus Sørensen, was a man of tradition, a man who believed that the empire he built with his own hands over 35 years could only be entrusted to his son. Lukas was his chosen heir before he could even tie his own shoes. By the time Lukas was 7, father was already taking him to construction sites, showing him how steel rebar bent into place, how cement hardened into strength. He introduced Lukas to business partners as the future of Sørensen Byggefirma, as though the rest of us were merely background players in a play already cast. And then there was me. While Lukas donned a hard hat and trailed after father on site visits, I was quietly nudged into art classes, design workshops, and interior decor lessons. These were, as father put it, suitable pursuits for a daughter. He never asked whether I wanted to build, whether I cared about the skeletons of structures, the way materials breathed with the earth, or the lines that defined the future of cities. In his eyes, those were men's concerns. My role was to be creative but never critical, decorative but never directive. My mother, Ingrid Sørensen, was the only one who saw me differently. She had once been an architect herself, a gifted designer whose sketches still lingered in drawers and whose models collected dust on shelves. Yet after Lukas was born, father persuaded her to give up her career, to devote herself to family and the silent support of his rising empire. Outwardly, she accepted. But privately, she nurtured something in me that she had been forced to bury in herself. She slipped me books on modern architecture, their pages filled with bold ideas and daring visions. She whispered lessons about sustainable design and urban innovation late at night when father was away. She taught me to see architecture not just as walls and beams, but as a living dialogue with the world, a responsibility to balance beauty with purpose. "Times are changing, Anna," she would say, her voice soft but determined. "Women now lead companies as large as your father's. They are no longer just helpers, they are visionaries. Remember that." But when I was 13, her voice began to fade. The diagnosis, breast cancer, came like a crack in the foundation of my life. For 2 years, we lived under its shadow, clinging to hope while the disease eroded her strength. When she finally passed, the silence left behind was unbearable. I had lost not just my mother, but the only ally who believed in my potential. After her death, Father grew even more distant. He buried himself in the company, his grief sealed behind late nights at the office and the smell of tobacco that clung to his coats. Lukas, at 19, embraced freedom with reckless abandon. Instead of stepping into the responsibility Father thrust at him, he fell into a cycle of late nights, endless parties, and careless indulgence. He would arrive at the office late, eyes red from drink, his shirt half-buttoned while Father looked the other way. And me? I turned inward. I poured myself into my studies, determined to prove, if not to Father, then at least to myself, that I was capable. Numbers, geometry, materials science, they became my allies. I excelled in mathematics, in design, in every subject that demanded discipline and imagination. Teachers praised me. My classmates envied me. But at home, none of it mattered. My report cards, heavy with A's, barely earned a glance. Meanwhile, Lukas's mediocrity was treated as inevitability. When he brought home a C in accounting, Father dismissed it with a shrug. "That's why you'll have a team of accountants working for you, son," he said. The same grade from me would have been a failure. For Lukas, it was just another reminder that his place at the top was already secured. The breaking point came when I was 17. By then, I had been working quietly for months on a project that mattered deeply to me, a sustainable residential community designed with recycled materials, powered by solar energy, and built around shared green spaces. It was my dream to show Father that Sørensen Byggefirma could be more than just another construction company, that it could lead, innovate, and adapt to the changing world. I remember the night I gathered the courage to present it to him. My heart pounded as I laid out the models, the blueprints, the calculations I had poured into the project. I spoke with all the conviction I had, explaining how this design wasn't just an experiment but a glimpse of the future. For a moment, I thought I saw curiosity flicker in his eyes. But then he skimmed through the plans in less than a minute, closed the folder, and set it aside. "This is not our business, Anna," he said flatly. "Eco-friendly fads come and go. Sørensen Byggefirma builds tradition. Solid buildings, not passing trends. Lukas understands that." The words sliced through me like glass. And then, as if to salt the wound, Lukas picked up my carefully prepared model and smirked. "Maybe you should open a little shop selling decorations, Anna," he mocked, holding the miniature homes between his fingers like toys. "You're always good with these tiny models. Maybe interior decor is more your style." I wanted to scream, to snatch the model back, to tell him that the world was changing, that his arrogance blinded him to everything real. But instead, I stood there, silent, the familiar sting of dismissal burning in my chest. It wasn't just Lukas's laughter I heard that night, it was the echo of my father's silence, the verdict that my voice did not matter. That was the night I realized something. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I achieved, I would never be enough for the world Father had built. Lukas could stumble, fail, and be forgiven. Could excel, innovate, and still be invisible. But even then, deep inside me, a fire burned. My mother's words, "Times are changing, Anna," stayed with me. They reminded me that the story was not finished, that the shadow I grew up in did not have to define me forever. I didn't know it then, but one day that fire would matter. One day, the same arrogance that made Lukas laugh at my models would unravel everything he thought was secure. And one day, I would step out of that shadow, not because they handed me the legacy, but because I claimed it, leaving and building my own life. The day I graduated from high school, I left Aalborg. I remember standing at the train station with a small suitcase, a folder of my drawings, and a heart that felt equal parts heavy and liberated. The money I had saved from part-time jobs, waitressing, tutoring, even cleaning offices, combined with a modest inheritance from my grandmother, was enough to fund a new beginning. Copenhagen was my destination, and architecture school was my dream. Father didn't try to stop me. In fact, the faint look of relief on his face when I announced my departure stung more than any words could have. It was as if my absence would lift a burden from his shoulders, as if my presence had always been a quiet reminder of something he did not want to confront. In Copenhagen, I began again. The city was alive with energy, a patchwork of history and modernity. I enrolled in architecture school, immersing myself in a world where creativity was celebrated rather than dismissed. For the first time, my ideas were not laughed at, they were debated, refined, and sometimes even applauded. I found myself among peers who valued sustainability, who believed, like my mother had, that architecture had a responsibility to the earth. The years that followed were relentless but rewarding. I survived on instant noodles and shared apartments, working late into the night on assignments and side projects. Through graduation, I joined a design firm in Copenhagen. It was not glamorous, long hours, small paychecks, demanding clients, but it gave me discipline and experience. Within a few years, I had gathered enough courage and savings to take a leap. I opened my own studio. I called it Sørensen Design, a deliberate choice. The name carried weight in Denmark, but this time it was attached not to concrete and steel, but to innovation and sustainability. Unlike my father's company, which built towers of tradition, mine sought to carve a path toward the future. I specialized in sustainable interiors, repurposing old materials and creating functional beauty from what others discarded. Iron beams from abandoned factories became staircases. Weathered wood found new life as furniture. Fabrics woven from recycled fibers turned into elegant upholstery. First, clients came slowly, but gradually word spread. By the time I was 28, Sørensen Design had grown into 2 studios, one in Copenhagen and another in Stockholm. An e-commerce branch selling sustainable home goods was thriving. What my father once dismissed as a passing fad had become not only my livelihood but my signature. I built a circle of friends who knew nothing of Aalborg, of Lukas, or of the legacy of Sørensen Byggefirma. They saw me only as Anna, the architect, the business owner, the woman who had carved a place for herself out of determination and vision. And in truth, I preferred it that way. My family became little more than shadows in the background of my life. I sent Father Christmas cards each year, though the only replies I ever received came from his secretary, typed on crisp stationery with no trace of warmth. Lukas, meanwhile, occasionally called me when he was drunk. His voice would slur across the line, bragging about contracts he had supposedly secured, or sneering at me for still playing with furniture. Sometimes he rambled about deals that seemed too good to be true. Sometimes he called only to hear himself talk. Through whispers carried back to me, I learned that Lukas had married Freja, the daughter of a wealthy Aalborg family. It was the kind of marriage father would have celebrated, a merger of money and tradition, respectability wrapped in a white dress. I was not invited to the wedding. I was not surprised. And so I built my new life brick by brick, piece by piece, until it was strong enough to stand without the Sørensen name behind it. Or so I thought. Call that changed everything. One April morning, I was at my Copenhagen studio, reviewing swatches of fabric and panels of reclaimed wood for a hotel renovation. The light slanted through the tall windows, illuminating textures that felt alive under my fingertips. The hum of productivity filled the room. Then my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, the area code from Aalborg. I hesitated. Something in me tightened, a quiet instinct I couldn't shake. I answered. "Is this Anna Sørensen?" A man's deep voice asked. "Yes. My name is Jens Mahler. I'm your father's attorney. I regret to inform you that Magnus Sørensen passed away last night from a heart attack." For a moment, the world stilled. The samples slipped from my hands, fluttering to the floor like fallen leaves. Father, unyielding, indomitable, a man who seemed carved from stone, was gone. He had died at 67, still carrying the weight of the company, the legacy, the empire he refused to let me touch. I left Copenhagen that same day. My assistant took over the project details as I booked a flight to Aalborg. The city welcomed me with memories at every turn, the smell of the sea, the industrial cranes against the horizon, the cobbled streets that once led me to school, to the library, to the small cafe where Mother and I shared cinnamon pastries. Driving toward the family home, I saw it before I was ready. The old villa, Nordic in style, built by my father's own hands when I was 5. Once a symbol of strength, it now seemed weary, its white walls chipped, the paint peeling in places. The garden Mother had tended had grown wild, weeds choking the rose bushes, branches stretching untrimmed toward the windows. Time had done what no rival could, worn it down. I stood at the front door, my hand hovering over the handle. I wasn't sure whether I was intruding or returning. The door swung open before I could decide. Anna. Finally. Lukas filled the doorway, though he was not the brother I remembered. His once broad shoulders were padded now with the weight of excess, his hair thinning, his face puffed and lined from years of drinking. He leaned against the frame, blocking my way, smirking as if my presence were some uninvited joke. "I thought you might not bother to show up," he said, voice dripping with disdain. I wanted to tell him I had every right to be there, that blood could not be erased with arrogance, but the words caught in my throat. Inside, the house buzzed with the preparations for the funeral. Freja, his wife, stood at the center of it all, directing caterers and florists with the efficiency of someone hosting a gala rather than a wake. When she saw me, she greeted me with a polite smile, the kind that carried no warmth but plenty of judgment. "Anna," she said, her tone carefully neutral, "so glad you could come." Father's business associates hovered in corners, their conversations clipped. They looked at me with curiosity, addressing me as the daughter from Copenhagen, as if I were some distant relative rather than blood. I was a stranger in my own home. Lukas wasted no time reminding me of it. He leaned in close, his breath heavy with alcohol despite the early hour. "Don't embarrass us, Anna," he whispered, his eyes gleaming with mockery. "This is family business. Try to stay out of the way." I didn't answer. The walls felt suffocating, the air thick with memories and judgment. So I slipped away out into the streets of Aalborg to breathe again. I wandered until my feet brought me to Astrid's Cafe, a small place tucked near the harbor. Mother used to take me there on Saturday mornings for hot chocolate, the two of us tucked in a corner booth, sketching buildings on napkins while the smell of fresh pastries filled the air. The door chimed as I stepped inside, and time seemed to fold. Astrid herself was behind the counter, her hair now gray but her smile unchanged. When she saw me, her face softened. "Anna," she said, as if she had been waiting all these years. We sat by the window, and over a cup of strong coffee, she told me things I had not known. After a minor stroke 3 years earlier, Father had changed. His body weakened, his temper cooled. And though he never reached out to me directly, he often spoke of me. He carried newspaper clippings about my studio, showing them proudly to anyone who would listen. Astrid had seen him leave them at her counter more than once, folded carefully, as if he couldn't quite admit he wanted me near but needed to keep me close somehow. I stared at the coffee, the surface trembling faintly in my hands. Father, who had dismissed me, ignored me, made me invisible, had spoken of me? Had carried evidence of my work like tokens? The revelation was both balm and salt. He had been proud in his way, but pride unspoken is a shadow. I had built a life without him, convinced he never cared. Now I wondered if silence had been his prison as much as it was mine. The reading of the will and the unexpected truth. The will was read in the office of Jens Mahler, my father's longtime attorney. The space was lined with dark oak shelves heavy with legal volumes, the air smelling faintly of paper and old leather. Jens himself was a man in his 70s, with thinning white hair, steel-rimmed glasses, and the measured calm of someone who had witnessed decades of human drama unfold across polished tables like this one. Lukas and Freja sat at the far end, dressed in tailored suits that seemed more suited for a boardroom victory than the aftermath of a funeral. Lukas lounged back, one arm draped casually over the chair, a smirk tugging at his lips. Freja's diamond earrings glittered under the overhead light as she scrolled through her phone, clearly confident that what was about to be announced would only affirm their place at the center of the Sørensen legacy. Before the formal reading, Jens pressed a button on a small recorder. My father's voice filled the room, gravelly but unmistakably his. "I have made mistakes with my family," the recording began. "I have thought long and hard about how to divide what I have built. Respect my wishes, even if you do not understand them." Lukas's smirk widened. He leaned back further, already certain of what was to come. In his mind, this was only a prelude to his coronation. But then Jens began to speak. His tone was even, clinical, though his words cracked open the air like a hammer against glass. Sørensen Byggefirma was, from the beginning, legally incorporated under Ingrid Sørensen's name. It was a tax and legal strategy Magnus devised. Upon Ingrid's passing, her shares were placed into a trust until their daughter, Anna Sørensen, reached the age of 18. At that point, she became the legal majority shareholder. The words hung in the air, dissonant and unreal. I blinked, unsure if I had misheard. Jens continued. "Therefore, Anna Sørensen is already the rightful owner of Sørensen Byggefirma. As stipulated in Magnus Sørensen's final will, Anna inherits 85% controlling interest in the company, the family home, and the remainder of his personal assets." He paused deliberately before finishing. Lukas Sørensen inherits 15% non-controlling interest in the company, as well as his father's collection of antique watches, valued at approximately 700,000 euros. The smirk drained from Lukas's face. His mouth fell open, then twisted into a sneer. His fist slammed against the table, rattling the glasses of water. "This is a mistake," he barked, his voice echoing off the paneled walls. "My father would never hand everything to her. This is fraud or some kind of trick." Freja reached for his arm, whispering something, but Lukas shook her off, his face red with fury. Jens did not flinch. He folded his hands over the documents in front of him and said calmly, "It is not a mistake. Paperwork is in order, signed and notarized over 2 decades ago. This has always been the legal structure. What your father left behind was not a whim, it was a carefully considered plan." The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by Lukas's ragged breathing. I sat frozen, 1,000 emotions colliding inside me, shock, disbelief, a flicker of vindication, and above all, a hollow ache. My father, who had spent years ignoring me, diminishing me, had entrusted me with everything. When the meeting ended, Jens asked me to remain behind. He slid a sealed envelope across the polished table. "This is from your father," he said quietly. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter written in his unmistakable script, neat, deliberate, every stroke revealing both strength and restraint. "Anna," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I owe you the truth. Your mother was the one who planned for you to inherit the company. She believed in your talent, your vision, and your sense of responsibility. I did not always agree, but I trusted her judgment more than my own." I swallowed hard, my eyes burning as the words blurred. "I pushed you away not because I doubted you, but because I wanted you to prove yourself on your own terms. I feared that if I made things easy for you, you would never discover the strength I knew you carried. I have followed your career in silence, clipping articles, visiting your studio's website, even purchasing pieces for Sørensen projects without your knowledge. Every step you took made me proud. I was simply too stubborn, too afraid to tell you." The letter ended with words I had waited my whole life to hear. "You are the true heir, Anna, not because of blood, but because of who you are. Forgive me if you can. Lead with the courage your mother always saw in you. Your time has come." I pressed the letter to my chest, my heart breaking and mending all at once. Facing the truth and saving the legacy. I moved into my father's office at the headquarters of Sørensen Byggefirma. The space smelled of dust and old wood, a mixture of nostalgia and disappointment. On his desk, stacks of files revealed the depth of the company's decline. Poorly negotiated contracts, reckless withdrawals, and extravagant expenses, all tied to Lukas's name. Digging further, I found email exchanges between my father and Lukas. They painted a clear picture. My father had tried to rein Lukas in 2 years earlier, even reclaiming executive control when the company neared collapse. Reading those words, I felt a mix of anger and sorrow. My father had fought quietly, alone, while Lukas sabotaged the very foundation of his life's work. In the archives, I stumbled upon boxes labeled with my name. Inside were articles about my studio, photographs of my completed projects, even invoices where my father had secretly purchased pieces from Sørensen Design to feature in company projects. The bottom lay unsent letters, confessions of pride and regret, written in his sharp but trembling hand. Each line reminded me that silence doesn't always mean indifference. Sometimes it's simply a lack of knowing how to express love. Freja approached me one afternoon, her voice lower and steadier than usual. She confessed Lukas owed over 600,000 euros in gambling debts and was already scouting clients to start a rival company. Her decision to file for divorce wasn't just about protecting herself, it was also a warning to me. The very next day, Lukas appeared in my office, his face pale, hands shaking. He begged for a bailout, demanded the company cover his debts. I refused his plea, but I offered him a different path. Relinquish all claims to Sørensen Byggefirma, commit to rehabilitation, and work his way back from the ground up. After hours of arguing, he finally gave in, signing the papers with trembling hands before admitting himself into a treatment center. Rebuilding and reconciliation. 6 months later, Sørensen Byggefirma looked different, not just on paper, but in spirit. I redirected its focus towards sustainable construction, drawing from my own background in interior design and repurposed materials. Contracts stabilized, clients returned, and the company's name began to recover. The family home was transformed into something new, a hybrid office and community hub for employees, where collaboration replaced hierarchy. My mother's architectural models were placed in glass displays, honoring the woman whose vision had quietly steered so much of our family's legacy. Lukas completed his rehabilitation and joined the budgeting department. Though our relationship was still fragile, there was progress. Some scars never fade, but healing had begun. I also founded the Magnus and Ingrid Sørensen Foundation, dedicated to supporting women and minorities in the construction industry, people my parents would have admired for their perseverance and courage. At the launch ceremony, I stood before an audience and said, "My parents' true legacy isn't the company or the house, it's the belief that we can create opportunities for others." For years, I thought I didn't matter to my father. But I've learned that sometimes love hides in the choices people make, even when they can't say the words aloud. 5 lessons I learned. Silence doesn't equal absence. For years, I mistook my father's quietness for rejection. Only later did I realize his love was expressed in actions, in the choices he made to secure my future. Sometimes we need to look deeper than words to find the truth. Resilience is built through hardship. Walking away from Aalborg and starting over in Copenhagen was painful, but it gave me the strength to stand on my own. True resilience isn't inherited, it's forged in the struggles we survive. Boundaries protect dignity. When Lukas demanded a bailout, I refused, not because I didn't care, but because enabling him would destroy both of us. Real love sometimes means saying no and setting firm boundaries. Healing requires accountability. Lukas's rehabilitation showed me that reconciliation is possible, but only when someone takes responsibility for their own actions. Forgiveness is not blind, it is built on accountability. Legacy is more than wealth. My parents' greatest gift wasn't the company or the assets, it was the values they left behind: creativity, integrity, and the courage to make a difference. Money fades, but values endure. closing reflection and call to action. This journey taught me that our worth is not measured by the approval we receive, but by the courage we cultivate and the respect we give ourselves. I once believed I was unwanted, but in the end, I discovered I was always part of a plan larger than I could see. Have you ever uncovered a hidden meaning in the quiet gestures of someone you loved? Sometimes the truth arrives too late, but it still holds the power to transform us. If this story touched you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others. Together, we can spread stories that remind us of the strength hidden in resilience, the dignity found in boundaries, and the beauty of discovering who we truly are.